Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. Today's session is titled around securing your financial future with corporate bonds. So इस particular session में हम लोग ये देखने वाले हैं कि जो new launches हम लोग कर रहे हैं FYERS की तरफ से, which is introducing corporate bonds onto the platform, इसको किस तरीके से हम लोग use कर सकते हैं. So with that said, what we will do is we will take you through a very small journey on what corporate bonds are, how it is beneficial compared to fixed income classes like, for example, fixed deposits, inflation को किस तरीके से हम corporate bonds को लेके beat कर सकते हैं, but not using something like fixed deposits. हम लोग risk और rewards के बारे में भी बात कर सकते हैं. And post that हम लोग एक छोटा सा Q&A रख लेते हैं जहाँ पे let's try to understand कि corporate bonds को किस तरीके से हम as an additional instrument हम लोग अपना investment journey चालू कर सकते हैं. So with that said, what we will do is go through a very small presentation on corporate bonds that we have prepared for you. So please reserve any questions that you have for the end of the session. जो लोग हमको Zoom में join कर रहे हैं, you can post the question in the Zoom chat box. Those of you who have joined in via YouTube, please post it in the YouTube chat box. So with that said, let us dive into what corporate bonds are. So now, corporate bonds are basically issued by companies. तो कोई भी company corporate bonds issue कर सकती है. For example, publicly listed companies, जब वो capital raise करना चाहते हैं market में से, capital can be raised for a variety of reasons, जो हम next slide में discuss कर सकते हैं. But जब उनको पैसा चाहिए होता है, they issue something called as a corporate bond. And retail investors like you and me, we can go ahead and invest in such corporate bonds using our capital. Basically, हम लोग companies को पैसा दे रहे हैं, and companies in return are promising a certain interest rate to us. So this is the concept of corporate bonds. तो generally हम लोग fixed income classes के बारे में जब बात करते हैं, the first thought process is fixed deposit. लेकिन हम लोगों को पता है कि FDs में आजकल जितना इंटरेस्ट रेट मिलना चाहिए था उतना नहीं मिल रहा है, and inflation is it's close to 6.5% now. So corporate bonds might be the right fit for us. So with that said, let us go ahead and see कि companies क्यों corporate bonds मतलब issue करते. तो the first point to notice, business needs के लिए एक कंपनी मार्केट में आके बोल सकती है कि हमको इतना पैसा चाहिए बिजनेस चलाने के लिए, so that money we will raise from the public directly. So as you can see here, business purposes हो सकता है, expanding operations हो सकता है, acquisition funding के लिए हो सकता है जब when it's acquiring another organization, या existing जो debt book होता है उसको refinance करने के लिए भी they can issue corporate bonds. Similarly, debt maturity profile बोल के एक होती है जहां पे what they're basically doing is to improve their debt maturity profile. They are, or to basically reduce the risk of defaulting on their debt obligations, they are basically going out and issuing corporate bonds. This is the second reason. Third reason is reducing borrowing costs. So for example, traditional bank ke paas, when a company goes, the bank can quote a certain interest rate to the company, saying you have to pay us, for example, 12% interest rate, or so on and so forth. Lekin when they come to the public market, they might be able to raise funds at a lower interest rate, which they have to pay to the general audience, like you and me, retail investors. So iske alawa, corporate bonds typically unsecured होते हैं. इसका मतलब है कि company अपना assets pledge नहीं करती है पूरी तरीके से to raise money using corporate bonds. So this is another reason why they actually come to the market instead of a bank and raise money from people like you and me. So the next one is, for example, diversifying funding sources. So एक single lender से पैसा लेना, for example, a bank से लेके, they can continue that process or they can diversify it. For example, उनको अगर ये मानना है कि different economic conditions आ रहे हैं, ये आ रहे हैं, so at that point of time they want to diversify their funding sources, and they can try to source funding from banks, one, and secondly from another source, for example, like a corporate bond and so on. Then let's talk about credit rating. So when you borrow money at lower interest rates, for example, let us say bank is quoting 12%, but they're able to raise money from people like you and me at 10%. So at that point of time, when they borrow money at a lower interest rates, at that point of time, credit rating agencies jo hote hain, these credit rating agencies will actually give them better ratings because company का जो financial health होता है वो बढ़ते जाता है if their interest rates are lower, if they're borrowing at a lower interest rate. Then the next one is increasing visibility. So जब corporate bonds issue करते हैं publicly listed companies, then at that point of time उनका जो financial markets में visibility होता है stock markets में वो आगे बढ़ जाता है. So this can also help in gaining potential new investors, customers, and overall जो company का profile होता है वो ऊपर जाता है. So that's one more reason why we generally tend to, they generally tend to issue corporate bonds. The next one is enhanced financial reputation. So when a corporate bond is successfully issued and when it is successfully subscribed to, then this is a signal to investors as well as other stakeholders that the company is financially sound and it is being well managed, which obviously or naturally increases its reputation in the market. So these are the reasons why corporate bonds are issued in the first place. तो हमको पहले ये समझना था कि corporate bonds issue क्यों होता है before we move on to topics which are of our interest. कि interest rate क्या होता है, default risk क्या होता है, how long should I stay subscribed to a corporate bond and so on. So now that we have understood the first part, that is companies, why are they issuing corporate bonds? Now let us go on to investors' perspective and see कि investors को क्या मिलता है corporate bonds में invest करते हुए. So now to do that, first let us try to understand कि corporate bonds जो होते हैं, इसका interest rates होते हैं, ये किस तरीके से, how does it fluctuate? For example, there are corporate bonds which start at a 7% per annum interest rate, and there are corporate bonds which also provide a 13% per annum interest rate. So when people generally come, when they think of fixed income deposits, उन लोगों को लगता है कि corporate bonds में भी FD के हिसाब से return मिल जाता है. तो I'm not excited about corporate bonds, but that is not the case. There is a wide fluctuation. As you can see, on an average, a AAA bond gives you a 7% per annum interest rate, which is higher than many banks' fixed deposit rates. Also, A- bonds, which are still good bonds to invest in, even they offer as high as 13% per annum interest rates, which is fair enough. So with that said, let us try to understand कि bonds के जो ratings होते हैं, how are they getting classified? So AAA bonds जो होते हैं, these are the highest quality bonds with the lowest risk of default. So there are a couple of rating agencies in India. All the rating agencies have to follow the same process while rating bonds. It cannot be the case where, one rating agency is looking at certain factors and rating, a bond AAA, whereas another is following the same rating process and rating it something else. So generally, the ratings are classified by default as AAA, AA, A, BBB, and so on. ये D तक जाता है. D stands for default. So when it comes to ratings, AAA is the highest possible rating that is given. And from there onwards, we carry forward. So if we look at AA bonds, these are also high quality bonds with a very, very low risk of default as classified by rating agencies. A-rated bonds are bonds with adequate level of safety, which means they are safe with a low risk of default. This is how rating agencies are classifying it. So simultaneously, BBB bonds are medium quality bonds with moderate risk of default. So again, जब BBB पे जाते हैं, थोड़ा सा risk बढ़ जाता है. So generally, when we as financial entities, for example, FYERS is a financial entity, we also do our thorough checks before making sure that we are actually responsible enough to have the necessary degree of scrutiny done before we actually put a bond out on our platform. So generally, जब bonds पे invest कर रहे हैं हम लोग, we generally suggest looking at AAA, AA, and A-rated bonds. BBB, BB minus, going up until D, this is generally not recommended unless you are sure of what you're doing. So with that said, let us move on to the next one. Let us try to understand कि हम लोगों को bonds में invest क्यों करना है. So when we look at inflation today, inflation is somewhere around 6.5% as of now. right? When we look at fixed deposit in many banks, you're getting approximately somewhere around 6.7% on an average. आपको मिल रहा है. So when you take a look at inflation and fixed deposit, you are really not making any income. Your income is being stagnant. तो जिन लोगों को inflation के बारे में ज्यादा पता नहीं है, मैं I'll take 1 minute to explain why we are comparing these two. अगर आप 1 लाख FD में डाल रहे हैं and आपको 6% इंटरेस्ट रेट मिल गया अगले साल जाके, तो योर कैपिटल फ्रॉम 1 लाख बिकेम 1,06,000 रुपीज. मान लीजिए इन्फ्लेशन भी 6% है, तो इसका मतलब है जो नॉर्मल चीजों का कीमत होता है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल फूड, फॉर एग्जाम्पल एवरी एक्सपेंस दैट वी इनकर, ग्रोसरीज, शर्ट्स, एनीथिंग ऑफ द डेली एक्सपेंस, जब वो भी मतलब 6% बढ़ जाता है, then actually speaking you did not make any money by parking your money in a fixed deposit. So you need to beat inflation in order for you to be able to have financial wealth growing. So to do that, what stock markets is one way to do it, mutual funds is another way to do it. There is the third way, which is more secure than these two, which is corporate bonds. So corporate bonds में जैसे हम लोग देख रहे हैं, generally 7% is where even an A-rated bond starts off with an interest rate, and it can go as high as 13%, like we have shown here. There are a couple of A-rated bonds also which give 13% interest rate. And just a small note here, even Sensex or Nifty grows by 13% per annum. This is the average growth of an index for a long period of time. Even a mutual fund on an average grows by 13%, since if we take a very long horizon view and take a look at it. So this is a more stable, secure way to start your investing journey without going through the nuances of the stock markets. Especially, for example, अगर आपका ये मानना है कि Nifty has already touched a peak and Nifty might start correcting from now onwards, but you want to still beat inflation. How do you do it? It's not by parking it in a fixed deposit. It's not by parking it in Nifty. So at that point, you can either look at gold, but again, it is speculative. Gold भी नीचे जा सकता है. But another safe investment avenue to look at it is corporate bonds itself. So I hope I'm making it clear as to why you should be considering corporate bond as another source of investment, apart from stocks, mutual funds, and everything else that you've invested in. So now, with this said, let us try to understand कि जब आप corporate bonds में invest करते हैं, आपका जो interest rate frequency होता है, what is your interest rate frequency? So when you invest in a corporate bond, the company which is issuing it either can pay your interest rates monthly, that is once a month, quarterly, इसका मतलब है 4 बार एक साल में आपको interest मिल जाएगा. For example, 10% है एक साल का interest rate. Let us say the issuing company issues quarterly interest rates. तो इसका मतलब है 2.5% आपको हर क्वार्टर आपको क्रेडिट होते जाएगा. Then semi-annual is 2 times a year. For example, if the bond has 10% interest rate, 5% in the first 6 months, 5% in the next 6 months. Annual is once a year, and upon maturity is आपको wait करना पड़ेगा. If you've taken the bond, for example, 5 years, 5 years is the maturity date of the bond. Post 5 years, जितना भी cumulative interest आपको मिलना था, वो एक ही shot में आपको मिल जाएगा. So these are the interest payment frequencies. Generally speaking, monthly interest payment frequency is chosen by a lot of corporate bond investors, क्योंकि they see this as not only inflation beating, but as a constant source of revenue constant source of income coming for them. So I hope this is also clarified. So moving forward, how to choose a corporate bond to invest in? So generally लोग क्या करते हैं, पहले yield को देख लेते हैं. There are corporate bonds giving extraordinary yields out in the market. So first we'll have to understand why are they giving extraordinary yield. For example, if a corporate bond comes and gives some very high number as the interest rate, हमको पहले ये समझना है कि why are they giving high interest rate. They could have gone to a bank and they could have borrowed from a bank at a lower interest rate. Point 1. Point 2 is because they're giving a high interest rate. One, because they don't have brand credibility in the market. अगर brand credibility नहीं है, तो लोग थोड़ा सा डरते हैं वो कॉर्पोरेट बॉन्ड में, उस पर्टिकुलर कॉर्पोरेट बॉन्ड में इन्वेस्ट करने के लिए. So the company has to make it more exciting to ask investors to come in. तो तब interest rates बढ़ाते हैं. तीसरा वाला, they know that it is risky to start their investments in corporate bonds. So when the risk factor is slightly high to invest in any such bonds, then at that point of time, they increase the interest rates to make sure that investors keep coming in and start their investments in their particular corporate bonds. So with that said, the first thing to do is not to look at yield. If you start looking at just yields and investing in, ठीक है, मतलब ट्रिपल बी बॉन्ड हो गया, डबल बी बॉन्ड हो गया वगैरह, मुझे अच्छा इंटरेस्ट रेट मिल रहा है, मैं इन्वेस्ट कर लूं. What is the risk? The risk is it can get defaulted. Companies bonds पे default भी कर सकते हैं. So they are not immune to it. Just because they have promised paying you a certain interest rate does not mean that they have to make that. They can also default on it. Default करने के बाद मैं explain करता हूँ at the end of the session कि default होते वक्त मतलब what is the process, आपको मतलब कितना वापस मिलेगा वगैरह. But for now understand that default तो हो ही सकता है. So first processes we look at safety rate. Triple A, almost nothing to worry about. Double A, you're still fine. A, you're still fine. When you're going into triple B category, like we had seen, then it becomes slightly risky. From then onwards, you should be careful. Once you're convinced with the safety rate, post that look at the yield. Safety rating को देखते वक्त आप थोड़ा सा brand पे भी research कर लीजिए. For example, if Mahindra and Mahindra is investing, coming out with a corporate bond, we all know that it is a safe bond to invest in. But if an unknown company, which you've never heard of, which has a lot of debt on its books, so वैसे companies, when it's coming out, if the bond is rated as triple B and you're not completely convinced with the brand, don't go ahead, even if they're giving you 13-14% interest rates or as yields. So first safety rating देखने के बाद हम लोग yield देख लेंगे. उसके बाद we will see the payment frequency. For example, if your payment frequency is the last thing that we should look at, but those of you who are looking कि नहीं मेरे को monthly चाहिए ही चाहिए, then you can go ahead and try to see if both are fitting. Is there any payment frequency you can look at which you are comfortable with? So there are bonds which give you a once in a year yield. So us time pe, you don't have to, if you're not comfortable, you can wait for the next bond to be issued. So these are the 3 steps, most important steps to follow when we are researching on which corporate bond to invest in. So with that said, how do we invest in corporate bonds on the FYERS platform? So I'll show you a small demo of how you can go about it. So let's see how it works. First, you have to go to FYERS.in, then go to the right-hand button. Over there, go to the IPO section. So IPO section में जब आप जाते हैं, ongoing में जहाँ पे भी debt IPO mention किया जाता है, that's a corporate bond. So you can click on that, enter your quantity. So the quantity range will be mentioned there. Then enter your UPI ID. You need to mandatorily have a UPI ID. And after that, you can just click on apply now. So once you do this, you'll manage to successfully invest in a corporate bond. So when you invest in a corporate bond, before the bond gets assigned to you, that's when you can even cancel your, if you don't want to proceed with your corporate bond investment, let's say you've already applied, you can still cancel. But after a period of time, you will not be able to cancel. So make sure that you're very sure that you want to invest in a corporate bond before you go for it. So this was a very small, webinar that we wanted to conduct because we have launched corporate bonds for all our customers on the FYERS platform. And we sincerely hope that all of you will start considering that as a serious avenue for all your investment requirements. So with that said, what we'll do is open up the session for a small Q&A. Any of you who have any questions with respect to corporate bonds and so on, please feel free to inquire with us as to how to proceed. Apart from this, we'll also have another elaborate, comprehensive corporate bond session with one of our product managers who goes by the name of Suruchi Kapoor. She'll be coming over very soon to introduce corporate bonds in a very detailed format, and that session will be conducted very shortly. But for the time being, we are happy to take any questions with the launch of corporate bonds on the FYERS platform. Please feel free to ask your queries. So in India, the ratings, Rajesh, in India, the rating starts from AAA for corporate bonds, AAA, AA, A, triple B, and so on. Is there flexibility to exit from corporate bonds? Yes, some of the corporate bonds get listed in the secondary market. You can exit from that. Please explain the default case as well. So now, so let's elaborate more on defaults. So what happens is, let us say you've invested in a corporate bond, and let us say the company fails for some reason. Let us say they don't have the money to make interest payments to you. So at that point of time, it goes into the default category. Please keep in mind that AAA, AA, and A-rated bonds, it is very, very rare for them to go into a default. It is almost close to zero. But all the other kinds of bonds, for example, anything less than triple B, they have a good chance of defaulting. So when a bond defaults, there is a certain percentage of collateral that they will be obliged to sell, and you will be compensated for it. It depends on the bond. So that is something that we will be talking about in a very elaborate way in our next corporate bond session. But there can be some cases where a double B bond holder might be entitled to 20% of his investment as compensation if the bond fails. In AAA bonds, for example, it could be a lot higher than that. 50 to 60% could come back to you in case of a default, because of they've already kept a certain amount as collateral in case of default. So this number again will be very dependent. It is not a fixed number. It depends on which company, which rating, and what they've kept as equivalents to give you in case of a default. So that is a very subjective term. But in the next session, we'll take you through the examples, maybe a couple of examples of how it has happened in the past. But know that it is not a fixed number. It can vary from company. Should the UPI ID be the same of the Demat bank account linked with FYERS, or can it be a different UPI ID? I believe it can be a different UPI ID because it's, but let me clarify on this, and we'll come back to this. Can we pledge corporate bonds in FYERS? Yes. So it depends on the corporate bond. So AAA bonds, AA bonds can generally be pledged, and there will be a margin. There will be a haircut that will be mentioned to you. You can go to the FYERS platform, scroll down, and over there you can input the name of the corporate bond, and you'll have the haircut. Can we sell the corporate bonds prematurely if they're listed in the secondary markets? Yes, you can sell it to another buyer. What can be considered to be safe and yielding better bond? So I think I understand your question, Shiv. It generally needs to be AAA rated, AA rated, and A rated bonds, which are considered to be safe. So anything less than that is generally something you shouldn't touch as an investor. Is our capital safe with corporate bonds like FDs? Yes. If you're investing in AAA, AA bonds, it's very much safe. Why should one go for corporate bonds over FDs in terms of capital security? Like we had shown, I think this question was asked during the beginning of the session. You will not be able to beat inflation with FD. That is a fact. So if you want to beat inflation in a secure way, probably corporate bonds is the best way to go about it. Tax implications, there are corporate bonds which help you save taxes. We'll be elaborating this. Suruchi, that is our product manager, will be elaborating on this in the upcoming comprehensive webinar. What happens if the company goes bankrupt? In that case, is my investment safe? I just think we elaborated on this, Sami, but I think this question was asked during the beginning of the session. There are a lot of questions about defaults which were asked at the beginning of the session. I hope I've answered them. What may be the safe and better way to apply the bond? I mean, there's only one process to apply in the bond. Just follow the checklist that we have given you, and you should be fine. Credit rating agencies issue ratings for these bonds. There are multiple credit rating agencies in India. So they are the ones who issue these ratings to the bonds. Is there historical data available about defaulted bonds in history? Yes, if you do a simple internet search, you'll find enough data about it. Who gives these ratings? Again, I hope we have clarified about these things. So with that said, I guess most of the questions that have been posed in this particular session have been addressed. We also have a blog link in the description of this webinar. So you can just go to the description and click on the blog article, and the blog has a detailed description of everything that has been taught in this particular session, and much more than that. So I hope all of you take a look at it. Apart from that, if you have any specific questions that you want us to address, you know where to find us. You have to just go to FYERS community. If you don't know how to navigate to it, just go to Google and type FYERS community, come to our platform and start posting your questions over there. And we'll take up these questions and ensure that all of them are answered. Our team is always ready to answer questions which comes on FYERS community. So with that said, thanks a lot, everyone, for taking your time out and attending this introductory session on corporate bonds launch on the FYERS platform. We hope to catch all of you soon in the very comprehensive session, detailed session that we are taking about on corporate bonds. So with that said, thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great day. Take care.